Behind the Shades.
Of course, you are so gracious. Thank you. Amanda Blackwood. I live in Denver, Colorado currently with my amazing husband and our 6 cats. I think last time we spoke, I had a dog also. The dog has since passed. She was very old. So we're down to only 6 cats. Can you imagine? I'm a very outspoken survivor of human trafficking and become something known as sport torture. A lot of people don't know what that is. That's basically where you are tortured because somebody else thinks that it's entertaining. Grew up in a very abusive household. So all of this stuff seemed quite normal to me at first. So it's been this long, weird, wild ride. For people that want to know a lot more about me and a lot more about my story, my 2 websites are growthfromdarkness.com and detailedpieces.com. Both of these are named after books that I've written, which I now have 13, which is a few more since last time we talked.
Congratulations, 13 books. Wow. I'm hoping one day that I can actually get one under my belt because I know it's such a beautiful experience because it's like you're immortalizing your life when you put it in a book, right? Like how was that experience for you sharing your journey, sharing your open up your life basically into these books that you've written?
So doing it with my autobiography was probably the biggest challenge. I mean, it was also one of the fastest books I've ever written because, of course, I knew where the story was going. It only took me 1 month to write my entire autobiography. But this was because I had gone through years of extensive therapy at this point. I was finally ready to do it. And I'd wanted to do it for a long time before that. And I kept on putting it off. I couldn't figure out why I was putting it off. But in the end, it turned out that I just wasn't ready before that. So when you're ready, it all comes flooding out. And if you feel like you're not ready yet, at least try. And the reason I say that is because journaling and creativity help us to take back a sense of control over something in our lives. And the need for control is a trauma response that most trauma survivors have to figure out how to cope with. Writing, painting, drawing, these are all really great ways, and cooking are great ways of having a sense of control over something in your life. And you don't have to focus so hard on everything else around you that there's no way you'd ever be able to control. So all of this stuff, it's super helpful. But when you're writing about your trauma, you have to relive it. And it's such a challenge. When I got done with that book, I felt so relieved at that point because I knew that I had taken everything that I had been through and I put it down on something else and I gave it a physical body separate from my own. I could now set it down on the shelf and walk away from it. It no longer controlled my life. It was not there every waking hour. It was just in the other room. If I needed it, it was there. And sometimes it was going to come and smack me upside the head when I least expected it, but it wasn't going to rule my life. Not anymore.
When you look back at those books, or maybe if you see them in print, does it stir up any emotions? And if so, what type of emotions?
There's a sense of regained dignity and pride that I wasn't expecting. So people were starting to find me because the last man that trafficked me made me famous on a pornography website. And I knew that if people were going to be finding me anyway, that they needed to understand why. So that's when I started really speaking about it. And I published my autobiography and I started working really hard at trying to prove to the world who I was. But in doing so, I really just proved to myself who I was. I was a lot stronger and a lot more resilient than I realized. Every time I look at my autobiography, it reminds me not only do I have a sense of style because I'm wearing that gorgeous red dress in the background, but I have the ability to survive the unthinkable and then to tell my story. Yeah, less than 2% of all victims of human trafficking survive. Most die. Most are killed. Most commit suicide. Their mortality rate is astronomically high. I was lucky enough, blessed enough to be able to get out. And I was blessed enough to be able to be given a voice to speak up. I cannot help but feel that I'm doing some good in the world. It's not about me. It's about being able to reach out to other people that are going through stuff and saying, hey, look, this is possible. Let me help you. Let me show you. Let me take your hand and walk you through this. We'll get there together.
Was there ever a point looking back where you felt survivor's guilt and wondered why me and why not so many others?
Oh, for so long. So the second time I was trafficked, well, first of all 3 times that I was trafficked, I had no idea that what I was going through had a name. I didn't realize that until many years after the last incident. But the second time I was trafficked, I was basically sold as a commodity, as a slave on the market, by a couple who were my landlords to a man named Esteban. My life was worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $90, I think, for my whole life, the rest of my life. And when I was locked up in that small room, I was not alone. I was alone in the room, but I was not alone in the building. I could hear other people. I could hear other voices crying. I could hear the other doors down this hall. All had people behind them. All of them women, as far as I could tell. And when I left there, I didn't check the news. I ran straight to a police officer and tried to tell her, and she didn't believe me. And I refused to check the news. I refused to look it up. I refused to go back. I left and said, I'm never coming back here again. And that happened in Florida in 1999 when I was 19 years old. And I went to California because it was as far as I could get away from Florida without actually having a passport. And I started a new life. And for a while, I had forgotten about it, but it was always kind of there in the back of my mind. This is something that I did. I ran away like a coward. And I blamed myself for so long and called myself a coward so much that I wouldn't tell that story for such a long time. When in reality, looking back, if I had been smart enough or dumb enough or brave enough to go back for the others, I probably would not be alive now. He was right there on my heels. I didn't have that choice at that moment. The choice was taken away from me.
There's times in our lives where we look back and we always wonder if we could have done more. And we have that guilt built inside saying that only if I did this, maybe I could have helped one more person, or maybe I could have assisted in a different way. But I think sometimes what we forget when we do that is that any changes that we would have made maybe would have resulted in us not escaping, right?
Right.
So no one would have been able to be free from that situation. Have you ever had that perspective as well?
I call it Schindler's syndrome. If you've ever seen the movie Schindler's List, he pulls the button off his lapel and says, I could have saved one more. And yeah, every now and then I think to myself, I didn't get that speaking job. I wasn't able to reach whoever it was that I was supposed to reach there. I didn't do good enough. I didn't do enough. It's something that I fight a lot. It is my mission to reach out to as many people as possible to try to help them and to help them understand what they're going through is not their fault and that there is life beyond this. But I have known other survivors of trafficking that have gone back into trafficking, have returned to the people that were trafficking them. And I've known others that have ended their own lives because of what they've been through. And that is absolutely my worst Schindler's syndrome moments, is realizing that I could have done maybe just a little bit more for that person. Maybe I could have called them to ask them, are you okay? It's hard.
It is, at least for me, when I hear it, I begin to understand that maybe that there's more that I can do as someone that hasn't experienced it directly. And I know a few people that have gone through, yourself included, right, Amanda? But we're in two different parts of the world. But even that thinking is kind of limiting what I can do, because if I truly wanted to help, distance isn't a barrier. I should be able to help whoever that I can. And so I can understand where you're coming from. And that's why I always wanted to do more, and maybe me providing a platform for people like yourself and others that's helping them as well. And when you talk to other people about your story, does that help you with your healing process and carrying forward in your life?
It does when I talk to people like you. And I'll explain what I mean by that. A lot of people, when I do interviews and stuff, they want to talk to me. They want me to tell my life story. And it's almost to the point where it's scripted now. But when I'm talking to somebody like you're not that interested in the whole life story. You're interested in the here and now. You're interested in what comes next. You want to know, how do people get involved? This is the kind of stuff that I need people to be more interested in, not the sensationalized story behind it, but what we can do, how we can better understand what's going on. I mean, these are hugely empowering questions, number one. So thank you for that. But it's also educational. You know, you, by way of having this platform, by allowing me to speak and asking me to talk to you, you have given these people out here a glimpse of hope. You were providing total strangers with the ability to understand that there is more beyond what it is that they're dealing with now. And you've done that, not me, you.
Thank you for the kind words. Let me just, dust a little off of my shoulder. But that's what I've always wanted. And I think that's a beautiful way for us to be, because there are things that you may not go through that I may go through, but you're helpful in your own way. And many times we're helpful without even trying. That's a beautiful thing about human beings. Just showing up when you show up. Maybe when we first spoke, it was meant to be to build the kind of friendship and kind of conversation that we're having today, which is going to carry forward into the future. And since the last time we spoke, it seems, at least to me, that this has been at the forefront now: human trafficking, child trafficking, things like that. We've seen movies, we shared in the green room, how it's picked up by entertainment. And there's a lot of lines being drawn, not only politically, but culturally as well. So, what are your thoughts on it becoming more mainstream, but maybe not mainstream enough where it needs to be on everyone's radar?
So the issue with it becoming more mainstream is that the media is portraying only the sensationalized versions of what trafficking actually looks like. Last time we talked, we were talking a little bit about, I think I said only 1/4 of all victims are under the age of 18. That stands true even today. So 3/4 of all victims are over the age of 18. The media wants to talk about save the children. What about save everyone? Save the victims. They also sensationalize the idea of somebody being kidnapped and forced into trafficking. Kidnapping scenarios take up approximately 2% of all victims of human trafficking. Most human trafficking is done by people with a sense of authority over somebody else's life, usually family members and loved ones, parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. It's no longer a stranger danger issue. They're trying to push it as a stranger danger issue. It's a familial issue. And we need to be more aware of that. Now, there is a movie that's out right now. It's getting a lot of attention. It is supposedly about one particular man who started a nonprofit organization that was helping to fight human trafficking. Shortly before the movie was released, that man and that organization completely severed ways. And none of the money from this story goes to help victims of human trafficking. That means this is a form of exploitation of its own. When the media, when movie makers, when anybody takes the story of a trafficking victim and uses it for their own monetary gains without any thought to the actual victim whose story they've taken, that's exploitation. They are exploiting these victims' stories and leaving them with their hands out going, but what about me? You've made billions of dollars off of this. I made nothing. my story, my life has made you millions of dollars. And that man that started that organization, the movie is mostly lies about him. It was written by him. It is not a story about human trafficking as people want to believe it is. It is a story about one man and his perception of himself. Knowing all of this, I could not rightfully go and see that movie because I could not support their mission, his mission. Operation Underground Railroad is the organization that it's supposed to be about. They do some hard work. That is true. Not every penny that people are sending into them is going in that direction. People need to look at the financials for these organizations if they're going to get involved with them and start donating money to them. They need to know where their money is going. There are organizations out here that are doing a lot of hard work. There's an organization down in Colorado Springs that is a worldwide company. It's known as Compass 31. It is actually transparent with their funding. They tell people where the money is going. They show people what they're doing. They do the hard work and they offer all of this amazing resources and therapy and everything to be able to get these people back on their feet. And they don't exploit their stories. If you want to get involved with the fight, know who you're getting involved with. Don't just make a blanket statement, I'm going to donate to these guys. That's not smart. Be smart with your money. Get involved, but be smart about it.
And I think that's a major issue and probably why so many people get turned off by charities and these causes, because it pulls on your heartstrings. And many times you don't question where it's going to go. And I had to go through something similar when it came to when I wanted to work for organizations, because charity and helping others is a big, big part of who I am. But I want to make sure where the money going, or at least the resources. And it's like that old joke when you pull up to like a charity office and you see the CEO, their car's like a Lamborghini and someone else's car's like a Ferrari. And you see all these high-end cars in the parking lot. And you're like, wait a minute, this seems kind of unusual. But to those watching this and to those who maybe want to help outside of this movie and anything else, always make sure that you understand where you're putting your time, your money, and your resources, because it's very, very important that you're getting the type of results that you're looking for, right?
Absolutely. And if you find an organization that you think you want to work with and you want to donate money to, call them up. And this is kind of my personal trick. Call them up and ask them what they need. Not money, but items, materials. If they say they need pillows, blankets, socks, if they say they need toothbrushes, if they say they need dental floss, these are people with a real need. Those people might actually benefit from and do good things with the money that is donated to them. You can go down and buy a whole bunch of toothbrushes in bulk and donate to an, or you can do the lazy thing and just give the money yourself and they can go and spend it on the pillows and the socks and the toothbrushes. But if you really want to do something good, find out what they need.
So Amanda, so now that we've established how people can assist and where they can best put their first step forward when it comes to helping those who are in need, similar to your situation or just in whatever cause that they identify with, what are some of the steps that maybe you are taking to further assist victims of human trafficking in general?
So I'm trying to get a public speaking career really launched. It's hard to get my face and name out there at first, but I have done several different events now. One earlier this year, I was invited to come speak at a church in Arizona. And my husband and I drove down there for this speaking engagement. It was wonderful. And every single time I walk out on stage, I have to listen to see if there's a little voice. If there's a little voice, that's the whisper of God, I think. And that little voice this last time told me, you're not alone today. And I knew what it meant without having to go into details and say, what do you mean? I knew exactly what it meant. And when I walked up there, I told people, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is what I've survived. And somebody out here has been through it too. And they don't realize that it's called human trafficking because they don't see it the way that it's being portrayed with the media. By the time I was done, somebody walked up to me and said, I didn't know that what my parents did to me when I was a little girl was called human trafficking. She was the piano player for the church. I never would have known. I can talk all day long on a stage. I can talk on a dozen podcasts, but having a one on one interaction with somebody who needs it most is probably the most powerful thing anybody can ever do. On my darkest day, when I was ready to commit suicide at the train, I prayed all day long, please, God, just send somebody to see me. Just want somebody to see me and ask me if I'm okay. Because if they ask me, I'll tell them. And nobody would look at me. People had this sense of, not my circus, not my monkeys. It's not my problem. Oh, she's having a bad day. I don't want to interact with her. When we do that to our fellow man, we are not doing what we are called to do as human beings. We are social creatures by nature. We need to learn to put the phones down, put our heads up, and look around us, pay attention, and start to seek out those opportunities to help. This is what my life is all about now. I want to help. I have this trauma recovery mentorship. I do public speaking when I can. I talk on podcasts with wonderful hosts when I can. But it's always the one-on-one that I reach the people the most.
You're coming face to face with people, and like the piano player, the pianist, you're bringing this out to them, and you're saying that, yeah, this is that. Imagine, at least for me, hearing that story, you have someone that didn't know what they went through was actually what they went through. They maybe thought it was something else, or worse yet, some people could think that it's normal. Hey, everyone maybe goes through something like this. So when you're having that experience with this person, how did it feel to see them come into realization, hey, I went through this, I survived it. Thank you for bringing this to my attention and bringing it out of me.
There's so many mixed emotions. I feel sad for them to know that they had to go through it. But at the same time, I am absolutely overjoyed that now that they've pinpointed it, they know how to get the help they need specifically to be able to move beyond it. Because it is so hard to overcome trauma if what you've been through doesn't have a name. You think this is just some blanket abuse. This is not just abuse. This is prolonged torture. This is terrible stuff. Yeah. And if you tell people, I grew up in an abusive household, you're going to have a lot of people who say, oh, I totally get it. I understand. And they don't. They don't. They don't get it. They have no idea. But when you say, I'm a survivor of human trafficking, people stop. They take a step back and they realize maybe I should approach my conversations with you a little bit more delicately. And it's great being able to put a name to it, being able to find the resources to move beyond it, knowing that there's now resources available to you, because there are resources available to adults who have survived human trafficking. There are organizations geared specifically for that. You know, there's different organizations and resources and communities of other survivors, and you can come together and just be together and have this amazing experience with just your own community.
Yeah, if I were to rely on what I see, human trafficking would be painted a different way. Like you mentioned, you would think that it's everyone under the age of 18, right? And that's from the stories to the movies to the shows and everything. But you raised a good point where you said that the majority of them are actually those who are adults. And one thing I want to touch on when you said it is that, at least here in Canada, when I was studying like law and things of that nature, you're very correct to saying that the majority of the crimes committed against someone is from someone that they know. It's
Yeah.
not what you see on TV where it's someone leaping out of the bushes and snatching you and they're running off. Does that happen? Yes. Is it the norm? Absolutely not. Right. So you should be cautious of those you don't know, of course. Like you want to be aware of your surroundings and things of that nature. But if you're thinking the kidnappings, the murders, the assaults, whether they're physical, sexual in nature, if you're thinking that is coming from someone who's lurking in the bushes, you have another thing coming. It's usually someone, as you mentioned, that's in an authority over you or someone that's close to you. And the reason why that is there's a level of you being comfortable and you're disarmed, right? They
Yep.
can come up to you and say, hey, why don't you come over to my home? And because you know the person, you may not think twice. And that's how they get you into it. Is that maybe something that you're cautious about when you're speaking to people that maybe they may fall into a similar situation because they're expecting it to come from one area, but most of the time it comes from another?
Yes, absolutely. This is a big problem. The more we tell people that the issue is stranger danger, and the more we see on social media where people say, oh, I was followed in a grocery store and then followed out to my car, this has got to be human trafficking. The more we are perpetuating the stereotypes of what is not human trafficking, that guy might be a trafficker, but the chances are incredibly slim. More than likely, he thought you were pretty and he's trying to get your phone number, or he might be something far more sinister. He might be a serial rapist. Who knows? You don't want to stick around to find out. I get that. That's totally makes sense. But stop saying that it's human trafficking. Because unless you talk to that guy and you have a candid conversation with him and he tells you what his intentions are, you have no idea. We have to stop with the stereotypes. And another big confusion that a lot of people have is they confuse traffic with trafficking. You know, when we look at the definition of human trafficking, I tell people all the time, don't Google it, don't look it up on Wikipedia. These are fallible resources. These are run by humans who can have an input. You want to look somewhere like the Department of Homeland Security. This is something that is a legal document, a legal website. They're not going to be screwing up this definition. And their definition is the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain commercial sex acts or labor from another person. There's no mention of transportation. So, this huge myth of human trafficking and human smuggling being the same thing are completely off. There's a huge overlap in the two, but one does not equal the other. Human trafficking does not mean you are moving a person from one place to another. So, you can absolutely be trafficked and have no idea about it because you might be drugged. You might be dealing with a family member who's saying, oh, just do this for me. You might be dealing with an abusive relationship. And you have no idea that what you're going through is actually trafficking at all.
So it could be, just so I clearly understand, and for those who are watching, listening, you can experience it within your own home. You don't actually have to leave the city or even leave where your primary address is. Is that correct?
Absolutely. You can be trafficked out of your own bedroom at home. This is probably the top way that young girls are being trafficked is from their own home.
Not that I'm trying to visualize it, but I'm trying to understand, how does that actually happen? Because for me, maybe for you and for many others, your home is your sanctuary. It's your safe space, right? Especially for children growing up, because you have both parents in the house, most likely. It's such a safe environment. For someone to be trafficked in their own home seems to be a complete violation to me. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. This is probably one of the biggest issues too, because it's happening in somebody's home. And we have this idea that a home is a safe place and that's where this child lives. So of course they're going to be safe there. One of the common ways that people are trafficked from their own homes is specifically with school age children. A young lady will send a risque or nude or partially nude photo to a boyfriend that she has in school. This boyfriend now has blackmail material over her. And he will tell her, you're going to do this for me, or I'm going to share this with everybody in school. And it starts out really small at first. You're going to steal a candy bar for me. You're going to kick Cece over there when she's leaning over to pick up papers. It starts out really small, and eventually it could be something as innocuous, something as insidious as you're going to open up your bedroom window tonight and somebody's going to come and visit you at 2 a.m. And if you say anything or fight back, I'm going to share this photo with the whole school. I'm going to tell your parents. And this is what we call coercion. So in that definition, force, fraud, or coercion to obtain labor or sex acts from another person, this is coercion. You are coercing this person into doing things under threat. Other places, if you are, say, living with your boyfriend and the boyfriend is trafficking you, he can tell you very easily, if you don't do what I'm telling you to do, I'll go take your little sister and force her to do it. Or I'll kill your family dog. Or I'll kill your family. The little sister thing is used far more often than I want to really explore too much. But one of the other biggest myths is, I'm talking about this from a female's perspective, and that's because I am a female. It's easier for me to talk about it from a female perspective. 46% of all victims are males. That's almost half. That is such a huge number, and we are, in general, completely ignoring the fact that this happens to young boys and men. There are grown men being trafficked in the world right now, and we are turning a blind eye to it because so much in the media is telling us to. It doesn't happen to boys. Boys are too tough. Oh, boys won't cry. Boys don't tell on other people. You're a boy. You can't rat somebody out. Absolutely, you can. Speak up. Open your eyes. Open your mouth. Say it. Let somebody know. We need to know.
I wonder if we would ever get to a point where we can bring down those numbers. I understand crime happens, but this seems to be something that's been neglected for so long. And it always seems, at least to me, that crimes that are sexual in nature, yes, you have the threat of people telling falsehoods, people lying. You always have that threat, especially when it comes to something like that. But it seems that, one, the numbers are closer than people actually think they are. Like, you would think that when it comes to sexual crimes, it's 98% only women and then 2% men, where many times it's actually closer to the 50-50 mark, as well as it seems to be something that is neglected, and then it appears in the media, and then it's like red hot for a couple of years, and then it dies down again, and then it shows up again. I wonder if we would ever get to the point where we would be consistently having these types of conversations to see, one, what we can do, and two, what the results are that we want to make sure that everyone is protected. What are your thoughts on that?
I think one of the biggest struggles that we have right now with all of that is legislature. People get tired of hearing about it if they feel like there's nothing that they can do about it. People have been crying about looking for that Jeffrey Epstein list for so many years now. Do you know why they're not releasing that list of names? It's because
I think I have an idea.
Yeah. A lot of people do. There's another myth. I might surprise you. The penalty for purchasing sex is about the same as driving over the limit line at a red light. It is an $80 to $120 fine. If they release those names, no matter who they are, whether they're famous or not, we would have a lot of people seeking vigilante justice for young girls that they have never met. We're talking vigilante justice in the way of murder, in the way of assault, vandalism, people getting wild revenge on people they don't know for things they didn't see. That's not the way you beat this problem, so to speak. Pardon the pun. The way that we have to fight this is by going to legislature, changing these laws. The penalty for purchasing sex from somebody who's being trafficked should not be $80 to $120 based on whatever state you're in. It should be forced imprisonment for a period of time. Period. You have to make these punishments more harsh. Another thing that we need to do is stop with these huge rings that we're busting. And I know that sounds confusing, but what a lot of people don't realize is that when you see this headline, this inflated headline of 162 people taken down in a prostitution sting operation or human trafficking sting operation, who are the 162? You're not getting that many traffickers. You are getting people that are being that are purchasing sex. So these people are going to get a slap on the wrist with an $80 to $120 fine and cut loose. And you are getting the people who are being trafficked. Now, these people who are being trafficked now have a rap sheet because selling sex is illegal. Of course it is. So now these people are building records and a distrust for the police. They need help, and now the police are further victimizing them. If they are taken into jail, do you know who's bailing them out? The pimps. These guys are going down there, bailing these girls out, now telling them, well, now you owe me more money. It's going to start this really nasty cycle. Anytime you see a headline with an inflated number like that, it is not what it appears to be.
I've always wondered about that because you're right. Like when you see something that says like 100 people busted in human trafficking, prostitution ring, some of these people are probably Johns. They're probably just the common person who just got caught that day spending whatever it is that they're spending. And two, some of them are probably the women. You don't get, quote unquote, the head of the snake.
Right.
The people who are actually doing the dirty work. And I think that if you to make it more of a crime, it would be better off because you can say that the person who organizes this gets X amount of years. The person who is underneath that person, X amount of years as well. And then it's clear and there. And another thing is name these people if they're found guilty, right? You don't want someone to just be wrong place at the wrong time and now they're associated with this, but try them and see what would happen. I think you would agree with that type of penalty.
I would. We also need to train the prosecutors on better ways of being able to prosecute for this crime. Because if you look at the prosecution statistics for human trafficking, the traffickers typically, I think maybe 10% of all who are tried actually face any kind of penalty. And of the 10%, very few get any kind of sentence beyond probation.
Those are low numbers, very low numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't give a lot of hope to the people that have been trafficked. You know, they've been in this world. They're trying to figure out how to navigate moving forward. They don't know. They think if they go to court and testify against this guy, maybe they can move on with their life. This guy gets out with probation. He's still got control over her. He can still have somebody go to her and murder her and end her life, or force her back into that world again. I mean, it's this vicious cycle. If you don't actually do something about it, it's going to continue.